Joining us for the second annual Black Lives Matter Day in Vermont. We have an excellent panel group this morning, and I'm very excited to hear their story and their perspectives and their comments, their voice. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves when I finish, and we're going to hold any questions until the panel members, until all of the panel members speak. Okay? Great. So with that being said, I'm going to start with Mark. Can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Mark Hughes. I am an Iowa native.
Stand up, please.
Can we hear you? Can't hear you really.
This is odd. You mean somebody can't hear me? All right, let's get real. My name is Mark Hughes. I'm a native Iowan. I've been living in central Vermont now for about the last 7 years. Excuse me, I don't want to crowd you out there. I currently reside in Cabot. I'm retired Army. I'm also the Democratic chair for the town of Cabot as well. I am, by profession, I'm a computer security professional. I've been doing that for the last number of years, starting cryptography. Over the last maybe year and a half or so, started to zone in with my attention on a lot of matters that I think a lot of life situations kind of blinded me to. In other words, I was just making too much money and doing too many things to care. And at some point or another, I started to notice, not just with Trayvon, but a whole lot of other situations that were going on. And then it became real to me here in central Vermont, and just understanding some of the things that are going on here as well. So myself and my partner, Allison Cerrone, who's right there, she's right there, right there, right there. She and I started a group called Justice for All, and that's what we're doing here in central Vermont, and that's basically addressing the racial disparities in the criminal justice system and how to go about dismantling the institutionalized racism within the criminal justice system, as well as healing and empowering communities. Thanks for having me.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Sheila Linton, and I'm a native. I'm born and raised in Brattleboro, Vermont, where I currently reside and have my 2 children. I work for the Vermont Workers Center as a field organizer, organizing for the One Movement for the People on the Planet, which is the Put People First movement, which encompasses many different campaigns. I organize around worker rights, human rights, and racial justice. I'm also the founder of the Root Social Justice Center, where I do a lot of my volunteer work, working on racial justice issues. And I also am a statewide advocate, where I help people advocate for their needs, which is really about defending their basic civil and human rights. And I'm here today to talk about workforce a little bit. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Fatima Pule. I'm from Somalia, and I lived here for almost 15 years. And I am a mother, and I'm also a family support consultant at Vermont Family Network. And I'm here for working. Yeah, I'm sorry. And to talk about refugees and Muslim community that I present. Talk about workforce, talk about schools, talk about education, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
My name is Dottie Morris, and I'm the Chief Diversity Officer at Keene State College in New Hampshire. But I live in Vermont. I've lived in Bellows Falls for the past 13 years. And before that, I was living in Westminster, Vermont, with a little stay in Massachusetts for 2 years, then moved back to Vermont, and I was looking to buy. I'm here today to talk about education, or the lack thereof. I think that should be underscored, or the miseducation that most of us have received, and the impact it has had on everything that we talk about when we talk about Black Lives Matter. So thank you for having me today, and I'm really excited to be here.
How are y'all today? My name is Jeffrey Caesar. I'm a native of Virginia by way of Richmond and Washington, D.C. I'm a student at Vermont Law School and here with the Black Law Student Association. I'm founder of Live Smart Solutions, an organization that focuses on the social and economic development of developing communities. I'm here to speak on behalf of education as well as well as microaggressions.
And I forgot to mention, I'm a native of Louisiana. The great state of Louisiana.
Hi everyone, my name is Primi Martinez. I am a first generation American. My parents are from Honduras. I am here at Vermont due to, I'm a student at Vermont Law School, and I will be mostly speaking about microaggressions, tag team with my partner here, Jeff, and hopefully take away from this discussion to bring back to our community at Vermont Law School, and hopefully, gather a lot of information here and also disperse more information to you all about microaggression. Thank you.
So I just want to acknowledge that we're running about 25 minutes behind, and so we're going to try to maybe steal 10 minutes more, but then we have to kind of proceed with the rest of our day. So I want to caution you guys to keep it simple and.
Are you looking at me?
I noticed that.
My face is, I couldn't help it.
What?
He's so handsome, maybe.
Good excuse.
Gotta be it.
So,
I'll speak last then.
okay, so any of you can get started. The questions that we put on the table to help guide some of your presentation is, what would you like to relate to the public, to the community, as a person of color, as a black person living in Vermont, and, what do you hope to accomplish? That's a couple of the questions, so we can get started. Fatuma, why don't you start?
I think that we needed a way of Muslim community as a black to understand that because the way we dress and the way who we are is totally different, and we kind of face every day for physical abuse or verbal abuse, and we needed a way of understanding us, because also we kind of calling names, the names that is really, because we came from Muslim community, and then we just calling like people of sometimes we call like we saying that go back home, what are you doing here, and what are you doing here, why are you here, and we need a way of understanding who we are and get solution.
Yeah. Would you like to talk about your experience with your son?
Well, we also as a community, Black Muslim community here, also English is our second language, and we're not always familiar with system, and we almost not knowing about education, and also we face discrimination at the schools because of my son was called that his hair, because we African American and our hair is really curl, and my son was told that he get the children or students sometimes they touch his hair and they say, what is this? And it bothers me a lot when he comes to me and saying, oh mom, they touch my hair, and they asking me why you got this hair, because of it's lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the only thing I can contribute is the notion that a lot more black people are going to come to Vermont, like period, especially with Vermont Law School. The diversity office at Vermont Law School is really good at advocating and recruiting students of color to come to Vermont Law School. And I feel that is a reality that a lot of people here in Vermont are starting to understand, but are kind of getting surprised about it. And as that surge of communities are coming into Vermont, I think situations like yours is going to become more prevalent. And that bridge of communicating what, not to touch your hair, not to tell someone that they're pretty because they have less black features that traditionally people don't find attractive. Like those small types of microaggressions need to be addressed early on before that, because I think more harm is going to come if that conversation doesn't start at the early stage. So that's my public service announcement. More of us are coming. Like I can guarantee, like next.
Some at DC.
Yes, seriously, I can guarantee like at least 10 new law students are coming next fall. You know, with experiences from outside of Vermont. And Vermont is great. I love Vermont. Like I've never been in a place like this ever, and it's very warm and welcoming. And I think for me, one of the biggest things were just the small little microaggressions, but they were innocent in my experience. They were innocent microaggressions, but it's like if you came across the wrong person with that information, it can turn into something more. And so it's really important to educate people at this point before that surge happens, because the surge is coming.
In tandem with that, I believe it's also important not only to educate the individuals who are creating the microaggressions on not creating them, but it's equally important to educate those on the receiving end of the microaggressions on how to handle that appropriately. And that was something that I've definitely had to learn to go about appropriately throughout my life. Lived in Washington, D.C., as well as, or just outside of Washington, D.C. and Richmond. Both of them are very diverse communities, and you're dealing with all things that come with that, and it's almost like there's a little bit of a dichotomous key. You have to assess the situation, see what's going on, who affronted, where did it come from, did they mean it, and how you're going to respond accordingly. So it's more than just being reactionary. It's a whole thought process that comes along with it, and not everyone has had the ability to develop that.
Yeah. Let me piggyback on that. I think that, first of all, the reason why I'm in Vermont is because I love Vermont. Okay, let's just start on the right note here. What we're talking about is why are we here? If we took a survey around the room and I said, guys, why is everybody here? If you're here and you don't want to be here, then I don't know. I kind of question what's going on with you. I've lived in like 14 states. I've lived in 3 or 4 countries. And I've raised kids, and I've raised half of my grandkids, and this is where I settled down 6 or 7 years ago, and I ain't going nowhere. So let's get that straight out the gate. Okay, so starting on that premise, let's go to the next level, and that is where'd you come from? Well, all of us have come from somewhere. All of us. Whether it is last generation or 8 generations ago, all of us have come from somewhere. So that is the narrative I think that we need to create here as well as in the nation, because we need to stop talking about holding people out, holding people back, holding people down, and understand that we're all in this together, okay? So just be clear about that. The other thing is and I don't want to steal all the time, is perceptions and misunderstandings. I took a couple of notes. Vermont is white, period, okay? No matter how much acceptance or the perceptions of acceptance that there is, there's no escaping the fact that the vast majority of the state has little experience with diversity. The vast majority of the state has little experience with diversity. That's just how it is, okay? So that's where we need to start this conversation. The lack of diversity, just understand that it does inform white people's thought processes. It informs their expectations and the resulting decisions that they make and the interactions that they have with us. It's simple sociology.
Okay, well, I guess I'll go next. So I was, like I said before, I worked for the Vermont Workers Center, and what I wanted to talk about was just some experiences as a statewide advocate, as well as a workers center. We have a workers' rights hotline where people can call our hotline when they're facing a workplace issue, often discrimination, wage theft, things of that sort people will call us for. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about bringing sort of the realness, the anecdotal evidence to what is being said in the workforce. You know, we hear about the statistics, and we hear about women making less than men. We hear about black people making less than white people. We hear about disparities. We hear about all these things. But I really want to talk about the people and the stories, and about what is really happening, and talk about a little bit about my direct relationships with these people and what the stories that I heard from them. So when collecting stories from the Hotline Advocacy, it became apparent that the experience and conditions for the people of color, and especially black men in Vermont, workforce has been fair at best. Common themes of alleged harassment and discrimination for both employers and coworkers, differential treatment, and tokenism are often everyday occurrences with many black people and people of color in Vermont. I've heard dozens of stories from black folks and people of color being laid off, suspended, fired, or demoted for alleged things such as people being screened by their name on their application or by the sound of their voice or their picture. Many people know that the hiring process doesn't start when you get to the interview. The hiring process typically ends up starting on paper. And if your name is a name that is Muhammad at the end, or if your name's Shoniqua, then you might, or Ebony, you might not be getting that job. And unfortunately, we could all be just as qualified for that job or not, but because of that name, because of the color of our skin, or because of the way that we might look, we may not even get a foot in that door, and that is happening right here in Vermont. The other thing is about religion, and people are speaking about that, about religion. We are in a major Islamic phobia. We all know that, but there's phobias around religion in general as well, and I've heard both from the Christian brothers and sisters and the Muslim brothers and sisters what their experiences has been with their religion, whether it's their culture, their speech, their rituals, their clothes, their ceremonies, their dress, whatever it is, they're being discriminated against, being told they can't wear their native clothes, being told that it's not appropriate, being told you can't wear symbols or images, or you can't speak that way or represent, or if you speak of religion amongst your coworkers, then somehow they're in fear and are being indoctrinated or being put into a cult or some of that sort, and it's considered harassment of that kind. So there's a lot going on, and again, these are experiences right here in Vermont of actual people that I've spoken with. There's the people with disabilities. And of course, people with disabilities are discriminated across the board. But then when you add blackness to disabilities, there's been, people have come to me saying, they're just not tolerant of me. And I have zero tolerance for the word tolerance.
Amen. Amen.
You know, I don't want somebody to tolerate me. I want somebody to celebrate me. And so the reality is, is that what's happening in these communities is people who with different abilities or disabilities, what's happening is often workload is being put on them that is not attainable because of their disability. And then they're being said that you're not keeping up with the work, or you're a slacker, or you didn't fall through, or you didn't do something, and ultimately they get let go from their job. And it looks like, oh, well, it just looks like they just got let go and couldn't keep up. People have been fired because of their hair, their dress, or even their smell. I got somebody who had called me and said that I was fired because of the way I smelled. Wow. Whether that was because they weren't using chemicals and decided to be natural, whether it's because of what they chose to use, because of different oils or things, because of their culture, whatever it may be, it contributed to their culture and to their blackness of why they were fired. Often, I've also immigrants. We talk about immigrants being taken advantage of. People should understand and know that across the board, our migrant workers, our immigrant workers, they're having wage theft, they're being taken advantage of, they're having extreme workloads, and their conditions, their actual work conditions, are extremely hostile. And if you speak to migrant workers, such as Migrant Justice and the farm workers and other people here, you will hear their stories, and you'll hear some of their stories of death, of people dying on the farms because they can't access care, of 5, 10 people living in a trailer where there's no water, of working 20 hours a day milking cows to not have any benefits and to be fearful that they're going to be deported and put in jail. These are the conditions that we live under here in Vermont. People with the disease of addiction are being denied work. The disease of addiction, people who use drugs have a disease, and many people are in recovery, and there's laws that help protect them, but often what's happening is differential treatment is happening. So stigma and blame is being placed on our communities, and this because of blackness is very serious. Whether it's the stigma or notion that black people are all hustlers, drug dealers, or thugs, or whether it's the stigma or notion that we're all drug users, when that isn't the case. And so what's happening in these people's lives is they're saying, I've had to get a drug test, but my white peer hasn't for this job, and I'm not really understanding why. So workers are often new Americans, are being told that they are not able to use their native language. We had a case right in Burlington where there was a certain entity who wasn't going to allow, who said that they could not use their native language amongst each other in a public space, and denying that of them. This is serious stuff that's going on. And they even said that it was making their co-workers uncomfortable because they were using another language. So if you are fortunate enough to get through all of that and not be tokenized as the black person on your job, hats off to you. Because that's where it then all then boils down to, is being tokenized. So a lot of us in the positions, it's like whether it's about getting people, a lot of times what happens is we become that face of our organizations, of our jobs, or whatever, and then we become tokenized. And I'm gonna stop. But the common theme through these people is that they identify having black skin. I explain across the board that there are different black people experiencing different things. But all the things that these people have in color, whether they identify as black or not, which society has identified many of these people as black, not us, that is because of their black skin. So I choose to use black skin rather than black because not all of us necessarily identify as being black. But the main reason why they felt they were treated differently is also to say that disproportionately people of color are experiencing these things in our Vermont communities. So yes, we will sit here and say, well, that's just their perception, or I'm sure it's not really like that. And if that's your response, I need you to open your ears and listen. That is actually what has been being said for centuries now, and it's time for us to take a closer look at these issues and to be connected with these people and to each other and to organize for change. Thank you.
I don't know if I want to follow. Thank you. I want to start off by saying I'm a proud descendant of people who were brought here as a result of rum deals. And what I really think is that the Black Lives movement, or saying Black Lives Matter, has become a mantra for black folks. Because for so long, we were dehumanized. For so long, we were treated as a commodity. Anything that you can buy, sell, and get rid of when you're tired of it. And the scary thing about it is, I think, as black people, we've bought into that particular narrative of who we are. And I think that through education, I learned, and I'm not talking about in the classroom, I'm talking about so many other places that I've had the honor to walk. I've learned that I'm no commodity, and yes, my life matters. I learned this, I just need to give you a story because I like to tell stories. And, about 4 years, well, maybe about 3 years ago, my great niece was working on a project for Black History Month. Or when I was a little girl, it was called Negro History Month.
They keep changing it.
Yeah, they keep changing it. And so she had to research Frederick Douglass. And at the time, she was in first grade. And so my sister, her grandmother, worked with her on her project. They went to museums, they did all this reading, they watched videos. And so when they sat down to write the final report, first grade, and she had to have a PowerPoint, first grade, she sat there and she said, "Grandmother, I don't know how to start. I don't know where to start with this." And so my sister was really confused. So she said, well, normally when you write a biography, you start off by giving their name, say they were who they are, and then you say, and he was born a slave. The child burst into tears. Well, she couldn't be consoled, my sister told me. So what we found out because I was trained as a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. So, of course, in those situations, they called me. Never mind, I've never had children. But my sister called me, and in questioning her, she said, if I say he was a slave, then I would have to say I'm a slave, or I could be a slave. To which I burst into tears because something hadn't been adequately communicated to her. And this is the way oppression works. This is the way abuse works, is that the person who is the victim often bears the shame of the perpetrator's actions. Okay? And so what I had to do, and what I've done since then, is really created the situation with every young black person and old black person I come in contact with, is saying, we are not responsible for our victimization. And I really think that this Black Lives Movement has at least allowed for that dialogue to take place. So a young student just asked me on Sunday, I was on a panel, and said, why is it Black Lives Matter, not all lives matter? And I said, yes, all lives do matter. I hold every life sacred. I love animals. You know, I mean, I'm afraid of mice, but I will not harm them. I figure out a way to get them out of my house, and that's a cat and 2 dogs. So, you know, they kind of keep them away. So I agree, all lives matters. But on this continent, we have grown to believe that Black lives don't matter. And it has happened from the time, or before we came here, that has happened. So when I think about education, or when I think about miseducation, and when I think about the lack of education, that narrative is not being taught in most schools I know, in Vermont or anywhere else. I work a lot in New Hampshire, and it's definitely not there. And so what I find is that a lot of students of color have internalized that shame so deeply. They've bought it lock, stock, and barrel based on a social construct. And that's the crazy making part for me, is that this is something that people made up, that they would give certain qualities to be more superior than the other. It's just made up.
Absolutely.
And so therefore we've bought into it. And I think that again, the Black Lives Matter has allowed us to say, we will specifically talk about lives that didn't matter.
Right.
That could be bought, sold, disposed of at any moment.
Nice.
And so I think that when I think about education, or the miseducation, I think that education runs so deeply in this country. If I didn't believe in education, I wouldn't be working in higher ed. I always tell people I traded money for time.
Good for you.
Because private practice is a lot more lucrative than higher ed, trust me. Even though I have an administrative position, it's not even close. But I started to think about what I wanted to do. And part of what I want to do is help to change the narrative of what education should and could be. And part of what we have to do is we have to start demanding that there's a broader story that's told, a broader story that's presented. And I'm not saying that we have to change all the history books. There's a book called Lies My Teachers Taught Me. That is a great illustration of how we're so committed to this myth of America that we're not willing to tell the truth.
Right.
And when you don't tell the truth, my mother said, good things don't come from not telling the truth. And usually she meant it related to her. But I've learned over time that truth telling is so critical. So for me to look in your eyes and tell you, you're not the reason for your victimization. Let that go of that shame that's associated with that. I had to do it to myself first.
Right.
In order to understand the years of self-loathing and self-hatred that I had, that I projected onto other black folks. Okay? So again, I have to keep going back to this Black Lives Matter has allowed for us to have that mantra. I matter. I matter. I matter. In education, we have to continue to push for more of saying our history matters. We were something before we came to this country, and we won't let you forget it now that we're here. And the more you try to deny our voice, the louder the voices get, and then some of the allies join on, and some of your children are happy to join on. I was on that college campus when Mr. Obama was elected the first time. And most of the kids who were fired up didn't look like me. Okay? So what we have to realize is that the more information